Hello, welcome to my video. So my name is Fahri Lilam Putra. You may call me Fahri. So for today's topic of discussion, we will be discussing about Introduction to Cultural Studies. This is a very exciting and interesting topic to discuss because we're not just gonna deep dive into what is Introduction to Cultural Studies, but also the methodologies or the approaches within the studies and how can we do it, and the function in terms of theoretical and practical, and lastly my plan for my research paper of doing kind of like an analysis of representation of a certain culture in popular media for my cultural studies project. So without any further ado, let's jump into the main discussion. So the first one is, what is Introduction to Cultural Studies? When we hear the word introduction, it means it's like the first base of trying to immerse yourself into the world of culture, to the world of studying culture. And then when we talk about cultural studies, this is where it gets kind of hard to, maybe tricky to understand, because a cultural study means that we try to analyze a certain culture, how it's being represented in media, and also how it is being treated in real life, and also how they portray themselves, represent themselves throughout the historical context in this world. So that is the basic definition. However, when we hear the word culture, we're kind of like familiar with it, but we don't fully grasp or understand into what counts as a culture and what does not count as a culture, or what is culture. So based on kind of like things that is being explained by a sociologist named Craig Colhan in 1994, he explained that culture is the learned norms or knowledge or language or values or artifact or kind of like way of life that is being shared within a group of people that share a common way of life, or a group of people that share kind of like the way they talk, the way they act, or the way they dress, or a certain group of ethnicity per se. So that is culture. So when we talk about cultural study, those are the things that we are going to analyze: the language, the values, the norm, the rituals, the artifact, the dress, the kind of like the way they talk, the way they act, and everything else within the culture. However, before we dissect deeper into our practice on doing a cultural studies, we need to kind of like understand that there are three methodologies that we can try to implement within the process of studying a culture. So those three are textual analysis, and then ethnography, and historical context or historical research. So the first one, textual analysis. So with this thing is that we're trying to understand about culture, studying about culture from the cultural text, whether it's the movie or film or in the books, or kind of like anything in the media that represent a certain culture. We try to understand a culture from kind of like a thing, something that represent them. We're not going to understand about culture directly from the people that is within the cultural group, but we try to understand about culture and representation or the portrayal of them through media or through the cultural text. And then the second one is ethnography. So in this particular methodologies, it's different from the previous one. We're going to learn about culture directly from the people by analyzing their lived experience, their social interaction, by going to the place that the culture exists, and kind of like live in that place for 6 months or 3 months. Try to do a little survey, interview the real life people about the way they live their life, about the way they act, about their culture, about their norms, values, tradition, and everything else. So it's different. The previous one is more indirect, but this one is more direct. The third one is historical context or historical research. So for this one, we try to understand about culture by going back into the history of this culture. How the experience of the people that live in the past influence the development of the culture, influence the improvement of the culture until the present day. So that is what we're going to learn. Like what happened in 1945 of this in this specific culture, and how it is different now in 2024, and what has changed and what has not changed from before. So that is what we're going to learn. And then when it comes to the function, there are two specific functions that we can try to understand. The first one is theoretical function and the practical function. So when it comes to theoretical function, by doing a cultural studies, we kind of like, in a way, train our critical thinking and train our ability to focus on detail and try to enhance our knowledge about a certain thing so that we become a more informed generation or informed individual when it comes to culture and representation. So by doing this, it enhances the relevant soft skills that we actually need when it comes to immersing ourselves in the real life in the future or even the present day. So by doing cultural studies, it does that to yourself. And then when it comes to practical function, so when we do a cultural studies and then we make a research paper about it and then we publish it into the world, and later on when other people in the future try to do another cultural studies that maybe talk about the same thing about us, or maybe improve the thing that we have talked about, or even talk about different things, but they need a certain material from our paper, our research can be this previous study that they can use as a reference, as a helping tool. That is how it can function practically in cultural studies when it comes to research. So theoretical, it will enhance our soft skills indirectly. The practical, it will become a helping tool for future scholars, future researchers when they want to talk about cultural studies. So our work can be the main reference, something like that. So those are the main explanation of what is introduction to cultural studies, what is culture, and the methodologies, or the approaches and the function within that spectrum of study. So now I will be discussing or talking about or explaining about my plan on what topic I want to discuss for my cultural studies project. So I've decided that I will be talking about or explaining about the representation of the religion of Islam in the Marvel series titled Ms. Marvel. So in that series, we are introduced into a character named Kamala Khan, who is a superhero named Ms. Marvel. She's born from a Muslim family, and she's not a typical Muslim girl that is being portrayed in common Western media, where the Muslim girl hates the way Muslim people live. They want to be a liberal and everything. They hate their parents and everything. But this one particular series, Kamala tried to embrace her culture, her religion, and try to use her religion as a motivation to how she used Islam and all the things that she learned from Quran to motivate her to become a superhero. So that is an interesting representation and interesting portrayal. So that is why I want to fully deep dive into into that certain aspect of cultural studies. And then when it comes to this research, I will try to implement a textual analysis, because obviously I will kind of like learn about this culture and representation based on the series or mini movie. So it's not a direct kind of like studies, but it's more about understanding a certain culture and representation through a cultural text. And in this case is a Marvel series that is being broadcasted on Disney Plus titled Ms. Marvel. So in conclusion, out of all the things that I've explained, the thing that we can try to understand is that cultural studies is important, because in this world there are plenty of culture, right? And in this day and age, there are many representation of every culture in the world. However, when we understand about cultural studies, we know when something is misleading, when something is misinformation, when something is biased towards a certain group, or when this thing is portraying a certain group of culture in a bad light, we can be a more critical individual, and we can be more informed as a scholars, as a researchers in the future. And for my kind of like topic of discussion, Miss Marvel, we can try to understand more about Islam and the culture that exists within the Muslim community, and try to shed a beautiful and better light on it, which is a new perspective that hasn't been done in the Western media since the beginning of time. So by doing cultural studies, especially towards kind of like a marginal culture, we can we can try to put them into this big light and let people know that this culture exists and this is how it should be represented. And by understanding that, we can try to be a better individual, a better scholars in the future, and more informed, and not easily fooled by misleading representation of culture. So that is the end of my topic today. I hope that we can all learn something. We can all learn about cultural studies and everything within the spectrum of cultural studies, and we can try to be a better or informed individuals in the future about culture and about the representation of it in the media, or even the treatment that they get or the treatment that we gave to that certain group of culture. So that is the end of it all. So thank you so much for watching, and see you next time. Bye.